In recent years, there's actually been a number of cases when fraud caused a lot of disruption and headache for a lot of medical practitioners. So yes, it is a real problem. Some of the key points to understand when fraud is detected, whether it's caused internally or externally, is that there will be a potential impact on cash flow because of impact on cash flow and revenue and the way income is reported, potential issues with tax office. If it's a breach of private information, there can be some legal ramifications. It can cause reputation damage to the practice if the news sort of leaks out that there was some sort of fraud. And if nothing else, it's a very consuming exercise for everyone involved, and it will distract the medical practitioners dealing with these patients effectively. So it will cause a bit of disruption, that's for sure. Well, both. There are different aspects that affect larger practices versus smaller practices. With larger practices, there is on the one hand the ability to hide among sort of larger group of employees if the fraud is caused internally by employees. And you have large amount of transactions, a lot of I guess opportunities where you can hide if you wanted to the aspects of what you're trying to do in terms of fraud. However, with larger organizations, you will potentially have more ability to create safeguards to prevent fraud. And what I mean by that is creating segregation of duties, invest more in appropriate software that creates controls for you, which is probably not always available for smaller practices. If we take the case of smaller practices, usually it's potentially can be just the medical practitioners and the admin person, and therefore you might find yourself in a situation that you can't segregate the duties. So it's on the one hand a lot harder to hide behind someone else sort of causing the issue because there's only one or two people in the practice. However, there's a lot more reliance on one person doing a lot more of tasks that relate to the practice and therefore increase the chance of a fraud. All right, so it depends on the size of the practice and the specifics of each practice. There might be some things that are relevant to, as we said before, smaller or larger practices, but as a general rule, medical practitioners should really create a culture where they encourage transparency in terms of how the processes of the practice are being managed. And what I mean by that is conduct periodic reviews of everyone's role to make sure that everyone's on board with what they're doing, create checks and balances where there's using software, the medical practice software. If the medical practice software doesn't provide these checks and balances, fully understand the process of what you're trying to achieve when dealing with your patients, your suppliers and your staff, and create your own process. You can engage with external parties to create internal controls reviews periodically and make sure that you're satisfied with how the practice is running. You should create forecasts and budgets to get some sort of a sense of what the results should look like, so you can protect yourself a little bit from a financial point of view in terms of reviewing the results later on and comparing them the actuals versus budget or forecast, and where there is a discrepancy that's potentially at least invites a question as to what's going on. So at the high level, you really need to get to know your practice processes really, really well and create the checks and balances.